And we are now joined by U.S. Representative Michael McCaul. Mr. McCaul, thank you so much for joining us today. I want to get really into this government shutdown. We entered a shutdown this week. Without pointing fingers about who's responsible for what, I want to ask you to pull from your personal experience as a federal employee. You were a federal employee before you were a congressman. What advice do you have for employees right now who don't know when they're going to get their next paycheck?
Well, you know, we've seen this movie over 2 decades. I've seen it. I also saw it from the Department of Justice side when Newt Gingrich, during those times when the government was shut down. I've never been a big supporter of shutting down the government. Nothing good comes out of it. And I would advise them that I was deemed essential. I would hope that right now, OMB, I'm sorry, is making the determination who is essential, who is not essential right now. But I hope we can bring this to closure soon.
Yeah, you brought up the OMB. The Hill reported earlier on Wednesday that OMB Director Russell Vought has told House Republicans on a phone call that federal layoffs are coming in a day or two. Were you on that phone call at all? You shaking your head yes,
yeah,
you were?
I was on it at 1 o'clock.
And how'd that phone call go?
Today. You know, basically he said that, look, we have a clean continuing resolution. We simply voted to keep the federal government open while we can negotiate an appropriations package. In the past, you know, the Democrats have voted for this 13 times under President Biden. I voted for it 13 times, and I've always supported a clean CR if we can get to the ultimate appropriations bill. When you try to inject policy writers and politics into this cycle, in this case, a clean CR, that's what mucks it up. That's what causes the problems. So now we're in a situation where the government's being held hostage. The Senate Democrats will not vote for something they voted for 13 times under Biden.
Right. And they have health care demands. You talk about policy demands. So you've been through a shutdown before. The last one was in 2018. What's the next steps? How do we come to an agreement as Democrats and Republicans to where we can open back up?
Well, we're not going to compromise on things like providing free health services to people who are not in the country legally. I mean, that's just a red line. I think, you know, some of the other things are, you know, the COVID, Obamacare extensions. We're past COVID now. So why is that being applied to this clean CR? I think they're political stunts that are being played. I think anytime you play politics, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, we've seen Republicans do this as well. That party seems to lose at the end of the day.
I want to go back to this phone call, the potential layoffs. What are your thoughts on that? You know, who's in trouble here? These federal employees that could lose their job ultimately.
I think anybody that the Trump administration's not big supporters of. I think right now the risks are starting to go out. That's that you're non-essential, and within 60 days they can terminate these positions. I do not think this is going to take 60 days to resolve. So I would give them some comfort that I just don't think that's going to happen. I do think they were doing this to put leverage, you know, on Chuck Schumer to make concessions on this.
So this could be a bluff right now.
I hope so.
Okay. Let's move on to the yogurt shop murders. This was some big news this week.
Yeah.
Kind of a breakthrough in this case. I want to first get your reaction to that breakthrough. We now have a suspect that detectives are very confident did this.
Well, you know, I'll never forget 1991. I was Deputy Attorney General for the state of Texas, and one of the most horrific crimes that we saw in Texas, but particularly in Austin. I think Austin lost its innocence in some respects that day. I've met with the families extensively, met with the cold case office and the Attorney General's office and Austin Police on this matter over the years. We were trying to get access to some of these commercial DNA databases. I passed the cold case bill that opens up, families can request a reopening of the case. But I think the bottom line here is to get as much DNA evidence from the state and locals into the national database so that we can make these determinations more quickly. I mean, this took 35 years. I applaud APD for what they have done in the Attorney General's office, but 35 years, you had 2 individuals who were prosecuted who now did not meet the legal requirements of being indicted in that case. And so I do think DNA doesn't lie. I mean, you know, it's not going to lie to you. It's not a forced confession. DNA will tell you the truth in every case. Really glad we had that DNA evidence from Amy, who unfortunately was raped and then shot in the head, and under her fingernails, that evidence that we were able to resubmit to that national database and get a positive hit. It really brings closure to the families and resolves this murder mystery. It's been out there for so many years.
And there was ballistics evidence in this case that the detective in this case said we were not able to solve this until 2025 when technology finally caught up. And it was really a call to all the investigators out there in the country, open up those cold cases, see what you can do with this evidence. And that's sort of what your bill does here is because, you know, the biggest advocates for these victims are going to be their families. And that allows them. Have you seen success like this?
We have. I mean, this whole cold case national database is starting to be put together starting in August. I would like to advance further legislation to make it a requirement state and locals put this DNA into the national, you know, database so that we can solve these cases more, you know, quickly and for the families too. This has been really hard on the families. You know, and I can't imagine. I have 4 daughters. I can't imagine them going through something like this.
Well, there's also the families of the 4 young men that were suspects in this case. 3 of them are still alive. Do you support the exoneration of those 3 men?
You know, I know the DA's office is doing their due diligence and trying to determine. Look, right now with the DNA evidence, with no evidence tying them to the scene of the crime, really it's the forced or the confessions without the cross-examination under the 6th Amendment that threw those confessions out. I always wondered about their guilt or innocence. I'll leave that to the DA's office to determine that. But I think with nothing. With no DNA, with no other evidence tying them to this case, I think that's the path they'll go down.
Sure. Well, let's move on. This is your last term in U.S. Congress. I've heard you say before in the past in interviews recently that things have shifted among Congress members, that things seem more performative, more partisan than they have in the past from your tenure in Congress. Is that the new normal, or do you see any path forward where we could start coming back together as Democrats, as Republicans, and be Americans first?
That's what I would like to see. That's the way I always conducted myself as both the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee and the Foreign Affairs Committee. Look, I didn't get elected to perform, scream and yell on TV and get YouTube, you know, shots out there. I really wanted to govern. I wanted to get things passed into law, and I knew to do so I had to work across the aisle. I think the mood and temperament of Congress has changed in 20 years. Over the 2 decades I've served, where it's become more vitriolic, demonizing the other party has become very much in style. And I don't think it's very healthy. I think working together, particularly on national security committees like the ones I've chaired, is so important to speak with one voice against our adversaries, for instance. But also, you know, I had the most effective committee in Congress last Congress because I did work with my ranking member, and we got those things done.
We want to go back to March. That's the last time that our program has spoken to you one-on-one. This was an interview before President Trump's address to the joint sessions of Congress. We asked you a question about what you hope to hear from the president. I have a long quote I want to read to you. This was your words. You said, "Usually, when you get off the campaign trail, the divisive, harsh rhetoric, the bully tactics, you have to govern. And then you're the president of the United States. I would hope he would act presidential, and I would hope he would deliver a message that brings the country together rather than dividing it. And I know in his mind he has scores to settle, but let's have that in the past. Let's move forward. Let's try to work together on making this a better nation than what it was when we came into it." We've seen a recent uptick in political violence in this past year, really. Do you think the president has done a good job at setting an example at the top to tone down the rhetoric? And did any of his actions in any way factor into your decision to step away from Congress?
No, the answer to the second half is no.
Okay.
I think after 2 decades and 2 chairmanships, I felt that I served my country and it was time. I think one mistake I've seen members make is they hang on to power too long and then they become irrelevant. You know, I will stay a relevant voice on the national stage when it comes to foreign policy, national security. Look, the president's style is not mine. Okay. Did that add to these things? I don't know. I've talked to the speaker about toning down the temperature, which then goes into violence. We're seeing too many of these shootings now. I think members are concerned about their own security now. And I think the tone of the debate, again, let's get back to civility. I would always have an agreement with my Democrat, lead Democrat on these committees. Look, we're not agree to everything. Let's try to. But when we don't, we can disagree with civility, and we don't have to yell and scream at each other. Mm-hmm. And I think that has changed in the last 2 decades for the worse. I do hope, to your point, we can get back to some of the civility that we had 2 decades ago. It's never been perfect, but I think social media has changed so much of this.
Sure. Anything else you'd like to add, sir?
It's just been an honor for me. My dad was a bombardier on a B-17, inspired me to serve my country in this space. I'm not going away, and it's been a real honor to serve the people of the 10th District. It's been a real learning experience, but as I look back on what I've been able to do in terms of making the country safer and the world safer, and the impact I've been able to have in a constructive manner, I'm very proud of those accomplishments. Mm-hmm. And as I look back in time, I hope history will treat it that way. But I'll continue to be a voice on the national stage.
Yeah, what can we expect from you in the future?
Yeah, we'll see. I'm dealing with offers right now. Ethics prohibits me from, talking about that kind of stuff. But I always want to stay in the space that I've been in for so long, going back to, Chief of Counterterrorism right here in Austin, U.S. Attorney's Office, Deputy Attorney General for Criminal Justice in the Attorney General's Office. So anyway, it's just been a true honor, and I think it's good to let go of power. It's humbling. But it's also very liberating. There are 4 ways to leave Congress. You can die in office, which I didn't want to do. You can lose. You can be indicted, or you can go out on top. I feel like I'm going out on my terms. I did it my way, as Frank Sinatra said, and I feel like I'm going out on top.
All right. Representative Sinatra, signing off. Thank you so much, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you for your service.
Thanks, Dylan.